And that, class, is why humans are strictly forbidden from participating in interstellar warfare. Professor Zarnock's 5 luminescent eye stalks wobbled for dramatic effect as he finished his lecture. The amphitheater-sized classroom, filled with students of every known biological configuration, buzzed with nervous energy. Slime-coated appendages shifted, wings twitched, scales shimmered uneasily. A gelatinous blue student raised a blobby limb. "But, Professor, I thought humans were banned because they're primitive and squishy. What's the real reason?" Zarnock's eye stalks stiffened. A shiver rolled through his thorax sacs. "Well, yes and no," he said slowly. "Technically, yes. Officially, it's more complicated. Chronobackfire, transdimensional treaties, vaporized star clusters, it's all very classified, but you're old enough to know the truth." A collective ooh rippled across the class, a sound composed of clicks, hisses, and mild gravitational pulses. Even the gelatin-based students solidified a little in anticipation. Zarnox sighed. It all began during the Third Zuravian conflict of galactic year 3912. The Zuravians, smug in their numerical superiority, decided to hire a few humans as expendable assets. You know, cannon fodder. He gave a dry chuckle. Oh, how wrong they were. The class leaned forward, those with limbs capable of leaning. The rest adjusted their flotation fields for optimal listening. "The assumption," Zarnox continued, "was that humans were weak, soft, emotional. What no one accounted for was that they are creative, recklessly, terrifyingly creative. They didn't just fight, they innovated." A feathery student named Kiki chirped. "Innovated how? New tactics?" Zarnox nodded grimly. "They called it thinking outside the box. What they meant was, take the box, light it on fire, strap it to a hyperspace engine, and hurl it at the enemy at relativistic speed." A green gas-based entity emitted a horrified whistle. But, that's not protocol." "No," Zarnox agreed. "It's not. That's the problem." Another student, a crystalline intelligence nicknamed Buzz, blinked in confusion. "Aren't there laws about that? Intergalactic war codes?" "Ah, yes," Zarnox said. "Humans invented something called war crimes. Most species view them as guidelines to avoid. Humans created a list of things too awful to do in war, and then did everything else." A collective gasp echoed across the amphitheater. One particularly sensitive student fainted, turning semi-transparent. "They made reverse-engineered our plasma rifles and laughed. One unit was caught using gravity wells as projectile accelerators. And don't get me started on the incident with the chronomirror. I still don't know which timeline I'm in." "But they're contained now, right?" asked Blobix, still half slid under his desk. Zarnox chuckled, a chilling, hollow noise. "They may said they'd stay on their home planet, said they needed a mental recharge and wanted to finish binge-watching all of Space Flicks. I don't know what a Space Flicks is, but it sounds terrifying." Kiki raised her feathers. "So, we didn't ban humans from galactic war." Zarnock's body dimmed slightly in resignation. "No, we begged them to stop." The class sat in stunned silence as the reality sank in. Not weak, not primitive, just human. As the bell rang, vibrating across multiple spectra, Professor Zarnox slumped at his podium. Somewhere out there, on that little blue planet, a human was probably grinning. And that, more than any black hole or antimatter cascade, terrified him the most. The lights dimmed in the auditorium, and Professor Zarnox IX's nervous luminescence flickered as he switched the main holo display to archival war footage. "This," he intoned gravely, "is what happens when humans are allowed to help." The projection showed a scorched moon drifting in orbit, its crust fractured like brittle clay. A slow gasp rippled through the students. "It was supposed to be simple," Zarnox said. "The Zuravan Empire had the numbers, the ships, the funding. All they lacked was boots on the ground, so they outsourced." He tapped a node, and the display zoomed in on grainy footage. A unit of Terran soldiers, laughing, singing, dancing, while assembling what appeared to be weather balloons. No one thought much of them at first. They called themselves the Overkill Club. We thought it was satire, a morale tactic. We were wrong. The next file played. The Zoravian capital's defense grid lit up with alarm as a human-engineered balloon floated lazily overhead, until it detonated, releasing a miniature wormhole calibrated to temporarily reverse gravity within a 5-kilometer radius. One student emitted an involuntary screech, another turned semi-liquid. They called it the upside-down happy surprise. Their naming conventions were misleading. Professor Zarnox turned back to the class. Humans do not escalate conflict in the traditional sense. They escalate ideas. While most species think in terms of tactics, humans think in terms of narratives. He brought up a quote on the screen. Why fight a battle when you can make the enemy question reality? Private Joe Boom Boom Thompson. Private Thompson later taught psychology at the Terran Military Academy, Zarnox added dryly. Kiki, feathers still puffed in alarm, raised a wing. Didn't the humans try diplomacy first? Oh, they did, Zarnox nodded. They offered assistance under strict conditions. The Zoravians laughed. The humans recorded it, uploaded the mockery to their planetary social network. A tremor passed through his cranial sacs. The retaliation came in the form of quantum-inverted pranks. Offices filled with live goats, weapons replaced with bananas. Then came the yeet cannon. The room fell silent. Yes, that yeet cannon. Named for reasons still unclear to this day, it weaponized faster-than-light travel by slingshotting mass around subspace currents. It was banned by the Galactic Ethics Board before it ever made it out of field trials. Globix oozed up slightly. But the Ethics Board shut it down, right? Technically, Zarnox muttered. The humans responded by miniaturizing the yeet cannon and deploying it via slingshot drone disguised as a soda can. Their term was tactical irony. Zarnox dimmed the lights further, casting long shadows. By the end of the campaign, the Zoravians had surrendered not from force, but from fear. Their entire war council retired and became pastry chefs on the moons of Halvanar Prime. A documentary crew arrived to interview survivors. The humans beat them to it and sold the rights to a comedy holo series. It's now the highest-rated program in 4 sectors. The display finally faded to black. So you see, Zarnox concluded, we didn't lose control of the humans, we lost control of the story, and that, class, is the one battleground they've never lost.
Professor Zarnox Nine's cranial sacs throbbed just thinking about it. He dimmed the lights again and summoned the next holosegment. Now, he said cautiously, let us discuss the moment the Galactic Science Directorate officially labeled Terran innovation as recklessly destabilizing. The class murmured uneasily. The holo display flickered to life, revealing an impossibly sleek Terran engineering bay. Human scientists in exosuits laughed as they hurled increasingly nonsensical items, lawn chairs, pizzas, gnomes, into a massive, glowing tunnel lined with graviton stabilizers. This, Zarnox said, was Earth's first yeet cannon. Its stated purpose, to see what happens when you throw stuff very, very fast. Kiki blinked. That's not a purpose. Oh, but it was, Zarnox muttered, and the results were catastrophic and oddly impressive. He tapped the interface, and a new video played. A probe disguised as a soda can collided with a pirate ship mid-warp, shattering its hull into fractal debris while broadcasting a laughing emoji on all open channels. It was a prank, he whispered. A physics-breaking, deeply disrespectful prank. Didn't they test this first? Asked Globix, now visibly trembling. Of course not. Their scientific process was let's say dynamic. Most of their experiments began with the phrase, "Hold my beverage." The class recoiled. Even the robotic student, NX77, let out an involuntary whir of distress. But it wasn't just the EAT cannon, Zarnox continued. It was everything. They weaponized sarcasm. They converted a food delivery system into a long-range artillery platform. They once reprogrammed a terraforming drone to draw offensive shapes on an enemy moon. A few students giggled nervously. Zarnox raised a tentacle sternly. Laugh now, but it cost us 2 diplomatic treaties and a major trade route. He pulled up a schematic. Observe the chrono rift stabilizer, designed to slow time in a 20-meter radius for battlefield triage. Humans used it to create what they called a bullet time dance floor. Kiki squawked, for dancing. For choreographed dance battles, Zarnox corrected. He sighed again. What they lacked in boundaries, they made up for in enthusiasm. Their engineers were either mad geniuses or wildly undersupervised. One of them submitted a patent titled Quantum Banana Gun just because. NX77 began to spark from logic overload. And before you ask, Zarnox added, yes, they submitted it. No, we did not approve it. Yes, they built it anyway. No, it doesn't shoot actual bananas. I wish it did. The class was silent. No one breathed. Those who had lungs, anyway. Zarnox zoomed out on the galaxy map. By the end of the Zarafian War, the humans had fundamentally altered how we understood physics, war, and comedy. Our tactical manuals now include phrases like counter-prank response protocols and irreverent disruption mitigation. He turned back, more tired than ever. And that, my dear students, is why our highest security rating is now called Terran level. It doesn't mean secure. It means if they get involved, good luck. Professor Zarnox 9 slumped behind his desk, cranial sacs throbbing with intellectual fatigue. He'd said too much in class, again. But the students needed to understand. This wasn't mythology. This was history. The humans weren't legends. They were real, and possibly watching. A soft chime broke his brooding. Incoming transmission. Origin. Earth. Zarnox froze. All 7 of his heart stuttered. He hesitated, then tapped the accept glyph with a trembling tentacle. The screen flickered, and there he was, Captain Juno Rivas, human, smiling like he'd just triggered a prank that wouldn't go off for another century. Hey, Prof, Rivas grinned, leaning into the camera. Long time no galactic holocall. Still terrifying students with tales of our tactical absurdities. Zarnox's chromatophores flushed an anxious blue. Captain Rivas, to what do I owe this unexpected contact? Oh, you know, just checking in, making sure no one's planning any initiatives involving our planetary quarantine. We are still peacefully grounded, after all. Well, unless you count Mars. Zarnox's eye stalks flared. Mars? Yeah, Rivas replied nonchalantly. We've started colonizing the inner solar system. Got a few outposts on Europa now. Pretty exciting stuff. Zarnox sputtered. Europa is a protected celestial... Rivers raised a brow. Yeah. Galactic Council rules. But see, from Europa's point of view, we're the aliens. Perspective, Prof. Zarnox pressed both tentacles to his temples. You're bending more than protocol. You're reshaping logic. The human chuckled. You noticed. But you agreed to stay planet-bound, Zarnox said, voice brittle. We are, mostly, Rivas replied. Needed a breather, decompress. Finish binge-watching space flicks. Still haven't caught up on Space Detectives Temporal Edition. You paused Interstellar Conquest to watch serialized fiction? Rivas shrugged. Balance, Professor. Gotta recharge. You ever seen a human after finals week? Galactic threat levels plummet with proper snacks and drama arcs. Zarnox wanted to scream. Also, Rivas continued, grinning, We heard your classroom was bugged, standard observation stuff. Cute. The professor flinched. How long have you known? Since we installed it for you, Rivas said cheerfully. Faraday cage, custom gift. We're adorable that way. Zarnox sagged like a punctured biosuit. But why? Why let us think we had control? Rivas' smile softened, just a hair. Because it's better this way. Keeps you cautious, keeps us entertained. And honestly, Prof, we don't want war. We want to build things, explore. But every now and then someone forgets what we're capable of. Zarnox barely breathed. So, Rivas said, his tone casually terrifying, we're thinking of attending the next Galactic Council Summit. You know, as guests. Zarnox's chromatophores cycled into panic. Orange. The ban. Oh, relax, Rivas waved him off. We're not coming as warriors. We're just a species of curious, mildly unstable explorers. Maybe a bit enthusiastic. We'll bring snacks. The call ended. Zarnox stared blankly at the darkened screen. Snacks. He staggered from his desk, unsure if he was going for a sedative, a drink, or a cryogenic nap. Somewhere in the galaxy, a black hole hiccuped. Zarnox could have sworn it sounded like laughter 3 galactic standard weeks later. Professor Zarnox 9 stood rigid in the atrium of the Galactic Council headquarters, his tentacles writhing with suppressed dread. The vaulted chamber buzzed with the intermingled noise of delegates from 1,000 species. Clicks, growls, sonics, psychic hums, and the occasional interpretive pheromone swirl. "Can you believe it?" chirped Kiki, now Zarnox's official assistant thanks to a paperwork mishap involving 6 bureaucrats and an accidental telepathic suggestion. "Real humans! Here, in person." Zarnox gave a noise halfway between a groan and a pleading prayer. The enormous doors at the chamber's far end hissed open. In walked the human delegation like they were stepping into a mall, not the seat of galactic power. Leading the charge was none other than the chamber was still echoing with confused panic as Captain Juno Rivas stood beneath the council's central dome, utterly unbothered. Around him the most powerful beings in the galaxy argued, flailed, malted, and short-circuited. A dignitary from the Clorax enclave emitted stress spores into the ventilation system, while the Volari ambassador had begun emitting a sound suspiciously close to wailing bagpipes. Rivas beamed. Now, he said, raising a hand, let's not panic. It's just the Olympics." Professor Zarnox 9 had collapsed halfway into a reclining chair and was massaging his ocular nerves. "Captain," he rasped, "please tell me you're joking." Rivas tapped his holo device again. "Not at all, Professor. The Interstellar Unity Games. A friendly little contest to promote peace, understanding, and extreme interplanetary chaos. We even designed new events." Kiki, who had taken to hiding behind a nearby pillar, peeked out. "New events?" "Oh, absolutely," Rivas replied. "We've got solar flare dodgeball, wormhole wrestling, and my personal favorite, graviton curling, best played on unstable planetoids." An aquatic delegate from the Clores Union tried to eject themselves from their fluid tank. Zarnox's voice was flat. "This is supposed to be diplomacy. And what better way to foster diplomacy than competitive sport?" Rivas countered. "Look, we know we're intense. That's why we're offering everyone a chance to show their strength, build community, share culture, launch each other into orbit." He turned back to the crowd. "We even brought prototypes." From behind the Terran delegation, 2 humans wheeled out a chrome and plasma contraption that looked suspiciously like a slingshot married a particle accelerator. "This," Rivas announced proudly, "is the orbital sprint launcher. 1 push, and you're in geosynchronous orbit in under 6 seconds. Zarnox made a noise no translator could identify. A robotic diplomat from the Synth Confederacy whirred to life. "Your activities appear hazardous. Revis nodded. That's the fun part, but we're adapting rules. Safety first, mostly. At this point, the intercom system chimed with a neutral voice. Motion detected. Terran. Proposal for inclusion in Galactic Unity games. Opening floor for objections. The chamber exploded again, this time with more structured outrage. A vapor-based bean-vented steam. You ride solar flares like surfboards. Ha! A fungal ambassador puffed a cloud that smelled like burnt sugar. You threw a black hole like a discus? We called it the spaghettification slam, Revis clarified helpfully. Zarnox stood, glaring at the human. You realize if this passes, you'll have direct cultural interaction with over 9,000 species. Exactly, Revis said, suddenly serious. It's time. We're not here to conquer, we're here to compete, to celebrate the absurd miracle that is intelligent life, preferably while wearing capes and throwing neutron javelins. The chamber paused. A beat passed. Then an old tentacled being from the Spilop Collective floated forward. We accept, it said solemnly. Let the games begin. Kiki fainted. Zarnox nearly joined her. Revis smiled. Better start printing the medals. Professor Zarnox's tentacles trailed behind him like wilted vines as he followed Captain Revis through the council's side corridors. The council chamber still rang with the sounds of panicked debate, and he wasn't sure if someone had just declared war on gravity or surrendered to interpretive dance. Where are you taking me? Zarnox wheezed. Just a quick detour, Revis replied, grinning. Trust me, you're gonna love this. No one has ever loved your surprises, Captain. That's because no one's had vision. They passed into a private hangar bay. The blast doors hissed open with a groan, and there it was. A ship. But not just any ship. It looked like someone had crashed a retro-Earth muscle car into a hyperspace drive and then decided subtlety was for cowards. Sleek chrome wings curved around triple exhaust engines glowing with quantum plasma. Racing stripes in neon pulsed with every heartbeat of the ship. Professor, Revis said, arms wide, meet the SS Havoc, powered by something we like to call the audacity drive. Zarnox stopped breathing. What in the name of causality is an audacity drive? Glad you asked. Revis tapped a fob. The ship hummed to life, its core pulsing with violet energy. You see, it runs on a blend of quantum improbability and bad decisions. The more ridiculous the maneuver, the faster it goes. Zarnox took a shaky step back. That's not propulsion. That's chaos. Revis shrugged. We prefer to call it creative physics. He walked up the boarding ramp. Come on, I'll show you the dashboard. It has a button labeled YOLO. We still don't know what it does. No, Zarnox shouted. Absolutely not. There are protocols, boundaries, laws. Revis paused halfway up the ramp. Yeah, we noticed. Thought we'd try rewriting a few. Just then, Kiki burst into the hangar, feathers in disarray. Professor, you need to come back, now. The Council's trying to pass an emergency surrender clause to Earth to prevent cosmic sports escalation. Zarnox let out a low moan. They're surrendering preemptively to a barbecue league. Revis nodded. Knew we should have opened with the cookoff pitch. Oh well, want to take her for a spin before galactic order unravels? Kiki looked between them, horrified. You planned this? Not exactly, Revis said with faux innocence. We were hoping for a friendly exhibition. Maybe rewrite some laws of thermodynamics in the process. You know, just for fun. Zarnox stared blankly at the ship, then at the human, then up at the stars. We're all gonna die, he muttered. Nah, said Revis, patting the hull. We're going to F. The council chamber was in full meltdown. Ambassadors wailed, emergency subcommittees formed in real time, and the ambassador from Sector 9P had literally turned into a fog. Amid the chaos, Professor Zarnox 9 clutched a tablet covered in hastily rewritten regulations, and Kiki hid behind him, peeking out with wide, feather-framed eyes. "They're voting to surrender," Kiki whispered. "To Earth." "To prevent a sports conflict?" Zarnox groaned. "What diplomatic collapse even is this?" Across the room, Captain Juno Rivas looked as if he were touring a museum. He greeted the ambassador of the crystal in accord with a high five and gave finger guns to the psychic mollusk delegate. Then, a voice boomed across the hall. "I accept your challenge, human." All movement ceased. Delegates froze mid-molt, mid-telepathic petition. A titanic, multi-tentacled being slithered into view. Ambassador Corlax of the Spilopodian Collective. All 17 of his eyes gleamed. "If your species desires cultural integration through competitive absurdity, then we accept. Our best versus yours. One contest. Terms negotiable." Zarnox's internal pressure valves hissed. Rivas turned with a grin. "Name your game, tentacle titan." Corlax flexed 12 limbs. "If we win, your kind must cease galactic remodeling. Permanently." "And if we win," Rivas said, "you may name your price." Rivas leaned in. "All right, you host the next intergalactic barbecue." The silence that followed was planetary. Corlax blinked. "Barbecue?" "You heard me. A cultural showcase. Spices, sauces, hot plasma grills. No sentient ingredients, obviously." Ambassador Chen, who had just arrived, pinched the bridge of her nose. "This is why we can't have peaceful wormholes." Corlax hesitated. "You propose a culinary contest over warfare?" "Exactly," Rivas said brightly. "Bring your best marinades. Let the sauces do the talking." A long pause. Then Corlax nodded. "Accepted." The chamber erupted again, but this time in fevered excitement. Recipes flew faster than weapons. Scent-based species began comparing grill temperatures. A robotic envoy started analyzing spice heat indexes. Even Kiki found herself describing Earth's concept of seed cake to a group of silicon-based beings. Zarnox watched, stunned, as intergalactic panic mutated into party planning. "You planned this, didn't?" he whispered to Rivas. Roubaix winked. "Let's just say, nothing brings the galaxy together like fire, flavor, and a low-orbit rotisserie." And just like that, diplomacy had been replaced with a cookout. Professor Zarnox 9 had long thought the most dangerous word in the Terran language was boo. He now realized it was actually potluck. Within hours of the Spilopodian ambassador accepting the barbecue challenge, the Galactic Council's operations wing had transformed into what could only be described as culinary pandemonium. Spices were traded like black market artifacts. Drone fleets were rerouted for the emergency delivery of pickled root bulbs from 6-star systems. "Professor, do we have the dietary compatibility charts updated for methane breathers?" Kiki chirped, frantically tapping at a glowing data slate. "I don't even know what a slow-cooked neutrino-glazed brisket is, Kiki." Zarnox groaned, his tentacles wrapped around his cranial sacs. On the opposite side of the room, Captain Juno Rivas was deep in discussion with a group of energy beings from the Crab Nebula. "I get that you don't technically eat," Rivas said, drawing animated charts in the air, "but if we irradiate the brisket just right, you might be able to absorb the flavor signatures directly." One energy being pulsed thoughtfully. "Would it tingle?" "Like licking a solar flare," Rivas promised. Ambassador Chen, now unofficially in charge of Earth's Culinary Diplomacy Division, attempted to maintain order. "We need food-safe zones categorized by atmospheric compatibility," she barked, "and no fermenting quantum pickles inside shared oxygen environments again." Zarnox wandered over to a planning table where a group of time-sensitive species was arguing about historical authenticity. "If we're recreating extinct dishes," a chronoware entity insisted, We must respect the original planetary orbit at the time of creation. We are not altering orbital mechanics for soup, Chen yelled. Meanwhile, the Void Dwellers had offered to handle dessert. We have dark chocolate, their ambassador intoned, materializing briefly before vanishing in a puff of gravitational lensing. Kiki flitted back to Zarnox's side. Professor, the hive minds volunteered to organize logistics. Wonderful, Zarnox said dryly. Perhaps they can also explain how the hell we got here. Technically, Kiki said, glancing at Revis, with a smile, a brisket, and an illegal subspace oven. Zarnox collapsed into a chair. The worst part wasn't the madness. It wasn't even the casually broken laws of physics. It was the fact that, for the first time in decades, he wasn't worried about war. He was worried about how they'd top this next year. The galactic cookoff began with a countdown, a solar flare, and a spoon duel. The ceremonial ignition was handled by the pyro chefs of Tau Ceti, who lit the main grills by focusing a beam from their home star through a prism of hydrogen ice. The resulting flare cooked a nebulan fungus stew in 0.4 seconds and blinded 3 attendees. Cheers erupted. Professor Zarnox 9 stood on the elevated observation platform, clutching a mug of calming tea that shimmered with quantum uncertainty. "I think I'm hallucinating," he muttered. "Nope," said Ambassador Chen beside him, biting into a firecracker dumpling that literally exploded with taste. "It's all real." Down below, chaos had been replaced by organized chaos. Hundreds of booths lined the Grand Plaza of Unity Station. Each species had brought their finest dishes: gelatinous spice slabs from the Gelari, cryo-baked sand pies from the Methanites, and a floating molecular soup from the temporal chefs of Kronos Delta. Their soup was only visible during odd-numbered seconds. Captain Juno Rivez was everywhere. He manned the human booth, a retro-futuristic barbecue pit emblazoned with the slogan, "Grill or be grilled." Smoky tendrils laced with spices drifted through the air, and hungry aliens lined up for a taste of smoked ribs glazed in quantum honey. "Step right up," Riva shouted, flipping a steak with his bare hands. "Today's menu, gravity-grilled brisket and the classic earth chili, served with a complimentary fire extinguisher." A crystalline ambassador took one bite and burst into light. "Is that normal?" Zarnox asked. "Very," Chen replied. Kiki fluttered in with a stack of tasting reports. "Professor, the Void Dwellers submitted dessert. It's just chocolate, but it absorbs light." Zarnox took a bite and wept. The competition was fierce but friendly. The Spilopodian tentacle tart stirred debate. The hive mind soup scored perfectly on texture, and the energy being's plasma-infused cotton candy was deemed both inedible and unforgettable. Then came the judging. Representatives from neutral species, like the fractal beings of Dimension 4.5, rendered verdicts in color, frequency, and scent. The scores were transmitted across the galaxy in celebratory pings. And then it happened. The crowd stilled as Ambassador Corlax slithered forward. He raised a spoon. He dipped it into Riviz's chili. And he smiled, all 17 eyes closed in bliss. "A worthy opponent," Corlax intoned. The galaxy exhaled. The crowd erupted in cheers, flashes, and bursts of ionized applause. Someone detonated a celebratory meteor. Zarnox watched as aliens hugged humans, recipes exchanged like peace treaties. The council had voted unanimously to host the games annually. A new era had begun. "Professor," Riva said, appearing beside him with sauce on his face, "told you food diplomacy was the future?" Zarnox nodded, dazed. "You may have just saved the galaxy. With brisket." Rivas raised a toast. "To peace, to parties, and to never letting common sense get in the way of a good meal." As laughter rang across the stars, Zarnox smiled. It was ridiculous, it was chaotic, it was absolutely undeniably human. And it worked.